In the heart of Eldridge Hollow lies a tale so chilling it will haunt your very soul. Welcome to the Shadows, where tonight we delve into the terrifying legend of Abigail Thornwood. A séance gone horribly wrong awakens a vengeful witch, trapped between worlds for centuries. Witness the transformation of Emma, once a friend, now a vessel for evil, and Tyler, marked forever by the witch's touch. Experience a night of unspeakable terror as Abigail unleashes her fury upon the unsuspecting descendants of those who wronged her. From sinister seductions to a destructive final act, this story is a harrowing journey of vengeance and the supernatural. Dare to uncover the truth behind the witch's curse and the eternal torment of souls. Are you brave enough to face the horrors of Eldridge Hollow? The night air was cool and crisp, carrying with it the faint whisper of an impending lunar eclipse. In the small, isolated town of Eldridge Hollow, a group of teenagers gathered around a flickering campfire in the woods. The firelight danced across their eager faces, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. "Did you guys hear about the abandoned church on the outskirts of town?" asked Tyler, the adventurous one of the group, his eyes glinting with curiosity. He tossed a stick into the fire, watching the embers spark and fly. "Yeah, it's been empty for ages," replied Emma, a history buff with an affinity for the town's dark past. "They say it's haunted by the spirit of a witch executed there centuries ago." The others, Mia and Alex, exchanged a glance. Mia, a skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "Haunted? Come on, that's just an old tale to scare kids." Alex, a tech geek and paranormal enthusiast, chimed in. "What if it's true? What if we could actually contact her?" "That's insane," scoffed Mia, but her voice held a hint of intrigue. Tyler leaned forward, the fire reflecting in his eyes. "What if we do a séance tonight, during the lunar eclipse? It's the perfect time. They say the veil between worlds is thinnest then." The idea hung in the air, a mixture of excitement and apprehension swirling around the group. "Why the church, though?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with caution. "Because," Tyler said slowly, "if the stories are true, that's where the witch's spirit would be strongest. It's where she was executed after all." The group fell silent, considering the gravity of the suggestion. The idea of venturing into the unknown, of flirting with the supernatural, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "All right," Emma finally said, breaking the silence. "Let's do it, but we need to be careful." Equipped with flashlights and a makeshift Ouija board, the teenagers made their way through the dark, winding paths of the woods, heading towards the abandoned church. The building loomed ominously against the night sky, its dilapidated spire casting a long, foreboding shadow. As they stepped inside the church, the air grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped them. The once hallowed ground now felt desecrated, the remnants of the past lingering like a bad memory. They set up the Ouija board at the altar, the moonlight streaming through the broken stained glass windows, bathing the interior in a ghostly glow. As they joined hands around the board, the weight of their decision settled upon them. "Is anyone there?" Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible. The planchette remained still, and for a moment it seemed as though nothing would happen. But then, slowly it began to move. Under the ghostly luminescence of the lunar eclipse, the abandoned church was a cavern of shadows and whispers. The teenagers, their hands clasped tightly around the Ouija board, held their breath as the planchette began to glide across the board with a life of its own. "M-I-S-E-R-Y, spelled out the planchette, under the guidance of an unseen force. Mia's face paled. "Misery," she echoed, her voice trembling. The air inside the church had grown thick, charged with a palpable sense of dread. A cold draft swept through the broken windows, extinguishing their candles in one swift breath, plunging them into darkness. From the shadows, a low, haunting laugh echoed, sending chills down their spines. Tyler fumbled for his flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness, revealing nothing but the decrepit walls of the church. Suddenly, Emma, who had been unusually quiet, began to convulse, her eyes rolling back into her head. The others watched in horror as she slumped forward, her body eerily still. Then, in a voice that was not her own, deep and laced with malice, she spoke. "You dare to summon me, children. You know not what you have awoken." "Emma, are you okay?" Alex stammered, his voice laced with fear, but the entity controlling Emma sneered. "She is merely a vessel for me now. I am the witch you so foolishly sought, and for your arrogance, I will ensure you all suffer as I have suffered." The temperature in the room plummeted, their breaths visible in the icy air. Shadows seemed to twist and contort around them, forming grotesque shapes. Mia, panic-stricken, reached out to break the circle, grabbing the Ouija board and throwing it across the room. "We need to leave, now." They hastily gathered their belongings, dragging the still entranced Emma with them. As they fled the church, the witch's laughter followed them, a sinister echo fading into the night. Once outside, under the safety of the moonlight, Emma collapsed, gasping for air. Her eyes, once again her own, were filled with confusion and fear. Did it work? What happened?" she stammered, looking around at her friends' terrified faces. Tyler, his voice shaky, replied, "Something happened, but not what we expected. We need to get out of here." They hurried back through the woods, the eerie feeling of being watched never leaving them. As they reached their homes, a sense of relief washed over them, believing the nightmare to be over. But for Emma, something lingered within. As she lay in bed that night, trying to convince herself it was all just a game gone wrong, a whisper in her mind echoed, "You are never alone now." In the depths of the night, a shadow moved across her room, and a cold, sinister laugh filled the air. Emma's heart raced as she realized the witch's spirit had not been left behind in the church. It had come home with her. Ah, my dear nocturnal scholars of the macabre. It's time for a quick scare break. As we linger in these shadowy realms, a small favour I dare to ask. If my tales of terror bring you thrills, do not let our journey end here. Hit like, subscribe, and join our dark congregation. Now shall we delve deeper into the abyss. Let's embrace the darkness once more. Let's get back to the shadows. Days turned into weeks since the ominous séance at the abandoned church, but for Emma and her friends, life in Eldridge Hollow had irrevocably changed. The once cheerful and compassionate Emma had transformed into someone they barely recognized. Her demeanor was now sharp and callous, a stark contrast to her former self. Emma took a twisted pleasure in the misfortunes of others. A once kind-hearted soul, she now reveled in their discomfort and pain. Her laughter, once melodic and warm, had turned cold and mocking. Her words were laced with venom, cutting through the hearts of those who knew her. Her friends noticed the drastic change with growing concern. Tyler, Emma's childhood friend, recalled her comforting presence and how it had been replaced with an intimidating aura. "She's not the Emma we knew," he confided in Alex and Mia, his voice heavy with worry. Mia, who had always been skeptical, now harbored a deep unease. "It's like she enjoys seeing people suffer. That's not normal." In town, Emma's newfound cruelty was on full display. She berated shop workers over trivial matters, her scathing remarks leaving them in shock and distress. To Emma, these people were nothing more than insects, unworthy of her time or patience. Her once close-knit circle of friends attempted to intervene, hoping to break through to the Emma they once knew. They confronted her, their expressions a mix of concern and fear. "Emma, this isn't you. You've changed," Tyler said gently, reaching out to her. But Emma recoiled from his touch, her eyes flashing with contempt. "Changed? No. I've simply awakened to the truth. You are all beneath me, mere insects crawling in the dirt. You're not worthy of my time." Her words cut through them like knives, each syllable dripping with disdain. The friends exchanged worried glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Emma was no longer the person they grew up with. She was something else entirely, something dark and malevolent. As Emma stormed off, leaving her friends in stunned silence, a sinister smile played on her lips. She felt powerful, untouchable. But beneath the surface, a part of the old Emma screamed in horror, trapped and helpless against the witch's influence that now dominated her soul. The witch's spirit had not just followed Emma, it had claimed her, and the battle for her soul was just beginning. The sun was setting when Tyler received the unexpected call from Emma. Her voice, soft and apologetic, was a stark contrast to the harshness of the past weeks. "Tyler, can you come over? I want to apologize. In person." "Just you," she pleaded. Tyler, his heart heavy with a mix of hope and apprehension, agreed. He arrived at Emma's house as dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. The door opened before he could knock, revealing Emma in a strangely inviting demeanor. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, leading him inside. The house felt different, charged with an unsettling energy. Emma's eyes held a predatory glint as she gazed at Tyler, her intentions clear. She moved closer, her touch sending shivers down his spine. Tyler, caught between concern and a growing unease, tried to speak, but Emma silenced him with a finger to his lips. "You will come when I call you, boy. You are mine now," she murmured, her voice laced with an authority that wasn't entirely her own. Tyler felt an inexplicable pull, a force beyond his control, drawing him deeper into her embrace. The next day, Tyler's friends noticed the bruises and scratches on his skin. Concern etched on their faces. They bombarded him with questions, but Tyler remained tight-lipped, a haunted look in his eyes. Unbeknownst to them, the witch, still tethered to the ethereal plane, was using Emma as her vessel. She could not fully cross over to their world, her spirit fragmented by centuries of unrest. But through Emma, she found a way to exert her influence. Her plan was sinister, yet simple. To fully materialize in the physical world, she needed to anchor herself to a living soul, and Tyler was her chosen conduit. Emma, her once innocent host, was now a pawn in her dark game, a vessel through which she could manipulate and control. As the witch grew stronger, her hold on Emma tightened, her essence seeping into every fiber of her being. Emma, trapped within her own mind, was a prisoner to the witch's will, unable to fight against the overwhelming darkness. The witch's laughter echoed in the void between worlds, her plan inching closer to fruition. Tyler and Emma, entwined in her malevolent scheme, were the key to her ultimate liberation, a liberation that would unleash her fury upon the world. The history of the witch, now entwined with Emma's fate, was a tale steeped in tragedy and revenge. Centuries ago, in the early days of Eldridge Hollow, there lived a woman named Abigail Thornwood. She was known for her vast knowledge of herbal remedies and natural healing, a gift that drew both admiration and suspicion from the townsfolk. As a healer, Abigail was compassionate and kind, aiding those in need regardless of their status. However, her abilities and independence sparked fear among the more superstitious villagers. Whispers of witchcraft began to circulate, fueled by envy and ignorance. The situation escalated when a mysterious illness swept through the town. Desperate and frightened, the people turned against Abigail, accusing her of cursing them. Despite her pleas of innocence and lack of evidence, she was deemed a witch and sentenced to death. Abigail was executed on the grounds of the very church where the teenagers held their séance. With her dying breath, she cursed those who wronged her, vowing to return and exact her revenge. Her body was buried in an unmarked grave, her story becoming nothing more than a dark legend in Eldridge Hollow. But Abigail's spirit could not rest. Fueled by anger and a desire for vengeance, she lingered in the shadows of the ethereal plane, waiting for a chance to cross over. The lunar eclipse and séance provided her with the perfect opportunity. As the witch controlling Emma, Abigail sought to complete what she couldn't in life. She wanted to make the descendants of those who had wronged her pay, to bring misery and despair as she had suffered. Her wrath was not just aimed at the town, but at the world that had allowed such injustice. Through Emma, Abigail found a voice and a means to enact her plan. She saw in Emma the same strength and independence she once possessed, making her the perfect vessel for her return. By binding herself to Tyler, she could anchor her spirit to the physical world, breaking the barriers between the living and the dead. The witch's desire for retribution had festered over centuries, growing into an insatiable thirst for revenge. Her pain and anger were now a malevolent force, threatening to unleash chaos upon Eldridge Hollow and beyond. In this twisted game of vengeance, Emma and Tyler were the pawns, and the stakes were higher than they could ever imagine. The witch's history was a grim reminder of the dangers of fear and misunderstanding, and her return was a dark testament to the enduring power of hatred. Tyler stood in Emma's home, his body a canvas of bruises and scratches, souvenirs of their intense, almost frenzied encounters. Emma, or rather, the entity that had overtaken her, seemed to transform with each passing moment, her eyes gleaming with a dark, unworldly fire. Under the witch's compelling influence, they found themselves drawn back to the abandoned church, the site of Abigail Thornwood's execution and the epicenter of her vengeful spirit. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the dated structure. As they entered the church, the air crackled with a palpable energy. The witch, through Emma, began to chant in an ancient, forgotten language, her voice resonating with a power that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Tyler, trapped in a trance-like state, could only watch as the ritual unfolded. The witch's spirit swirled around them, a whirlwind of shadows and whispers. Her presence was overwhelming, a force of pure malevolence and vengeance. The walls of the church seemed to pulse with her energy, the stained glass windows shattering as her power grew. Emma's body contorted, her movements unnatural and jerky, as the witch's spirit fought to fully manifest in the physical realm. Tyler, caught in the eye of this supernatural storm, felt the witch's energy coursing through him, binding him to her will. He was powerless to resist, his own spirit diminishing under her formidable presence. As the ritual reached its climax, the air itself seemed to tear, the barrier between worlds thinning. Abigail's spirit, full of rage and hatred, surged forth, her ethereal form becoming more solid with each passing second. Emma's body, once a vessel, now became a conduit for the witch's full resurrection. Her eyes, once full of life and warmth, now glowed with a sinister light, the light of a soul consumed by centuries of anger. Tyler, his will completely overpowered, watched in horror as the witch's transformation completed. Abigail Thornwood stood before him, no longer just a vengeful spirit, but a corporeal being, fueled by vengeance and hate. The church, now a ruin of its former self, echoed with the witch's triumphant laughter. She revelled in her newfound power, her gaze cold and merciless. Emma and Tyler, once vibrant individuals, were now mere shells, their essences devoured by the witch's overwhelming need for retribution. Abigail Thornwood, the witch of Eldridge Hollow, had returned, more powerful and malevolent than ever. Her vengeance knew no bounds, and her wrath was set to descend upon the unsuspecting town. The power she wielded was a dark testament to her enduring hatred, a force that would leave nothing but despair and destruction in its wake. In the heart of the ruined church, under the spectral glow of the moon, Abigail Thornwood, now fully manifested, prepared for her most malevolent act yet. With newfound power coursing through her, she set up her own séance, a dark mirror to the one that had freed her. Her intention was twisted yet poignant, to summon the spirits of those who had wronged her centuries ago. She wanted them to bear witness to the havoc she would wreak upon their descendants, to feel the helplessness and despair she had endured. As she began the incantation, the air grew heavy, the shadows in the church deepening. One by one, ethereal forms began to materialize around her. The spirits of the long-dead townsfolk, those who had accused and condemned her, appeared, their faces etched with confusion and fear. Abigail revelled in their horror. "You who cast me to my death shall now see the consequences of your actions," she hissed, her voice echoing through the hollow church. The spirits, bound to her will, could only watch as she invoked another spell, this time to identify the living descendants of those who had wronged her. As names and faces appeared in her mind's eye, a sinister plan took shape. Before, as a disembodied spirit, Abigail's powers were limited. She could influence and manipulate, but her ability to interact with the physical world was restricted. Her incomplete state prevented her from enacting the full scope of her vengeance. But now, embodied once again, she possessed the capacity to affect both the spiritual and physical realms. She turned her attention to the helpless spirits. "You shall be my silent audience," she declared, "witnesses to the retribution I will bring upon your bloodlines. Your descendants will suffer as I did, and you will be powerless to stop me." The spirits, bound by her powerful magic, could do nothing but watch in horror as Abigail set her sights on the town of Eldridge Hollow. Her wrath was no longer just of a threat. It was a promise of destruction and pain. As she left the church, the spirits of the past lingering behind, the witch's laughter filled the night. Eldridge Hollow, unaware of the storm about to descend upon it, lay in peaceful ignorance, its residents oblivious to the nightmare that awaited them. Abigail Thornwood, once a healer and now a harbinger of vengeance, stepped into the shadows, her heart set on unleashing centuries of pent-up fury. The night, once a cover for rest and dreams, now heralded a terror that would be remembered for generations to come. The moon hung high over Eldridge Hollow as Abigail Thornwood, now a vessel of vengeance, began her night of terror. Her every step was a harbinger of doom, her laughter a chilling prelude to the horrors she would unleash. One by one, she visited the homes of those descended from the townsfolk who had condemned her centuries ago. Each act of retribution was more cruel and merciless than the last. She revelled in their fear and confusion, drawing strength from their despair. The powerless spirits of her accusers watched in horror, unable to intervene as their descendants faced the witch's wrath. In one house, she delighted in the terror of a family as they cowered before her, their pleas for mercy fueling her malevolent joy. In another, she laughed maniacally as she turned the happiness of a celebratory gathering into a nightmare of chaos and fear. As the night wore on, the town descended into panic. Eldridge Hollow, once a quiet and peaceful place, became a landscape of fear and despair. The witch, once a healer, now took pleasure in pain and suffering, her heart seemingly void of any remnants of the compassionate woman she once was. However, as dawn approached, her path of destruction led her to a house at the edge of town. There, she found a young woman, an outcast much like herself, known for her strange ways and healing abilities. The townspeople regarded her with suspicion and wariness, yet she continued to help them, driven by a sense of duty and kindness. Abigail paused, a flicker of confusion crossing her malevolent facade. She watched as the young healer tended to a sick child, her hands gentle and her voice soothing. Something within Abigail stirred, a distant echo of the person she once was. The sight of this young woman, so similar to her former self, ignited a battle within the witch. Her vengeful, hate-filled side clashed with the emerging memories of empathy and compassion she once held dear. Abigail's form wavered, her once solid figure flickering as the two sides of her spirit fought for dominance. The healer looked up, her eyes meeting the witch's, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The night of terror, which had seemed unending, now stood still. Abigail, caught in the turmoil of her own soul, faced a choice. Could the remnants of her former self, buried under centuries of anger and pain, find the strength to overcome the darkness that had consumed her? In the eyes of the young healer, a descendant of her own bloodline, Abigail saw a reflection of who she could have been, a reminder of the life that was stolen from her. The choice she made now would not only seal her fate, but also the fate of Eldridge Hollow. Would the dawn bring an end to the nightmare, or would the witch's reign of terror continue unabated? The answer lay within the depths of Abigail Thornwood's tormented soul. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Abigail Thornwood, her spirit torn between vengeance and a flicker of her former self, made her way back to the ruins of the abandoned church. The decision she faced at the healer's home had ignited a tumultuous storm within her soul. Standing amidst the decayed pews and shattered stained glass, Abigail raised her hands, her powers surging around her in a maelstrom of dark energy. The air crackled with the intensity of her emotions, a physical manifestation of her inner turmoil. With a final, resolute cry, she unleashed her powers in a cataclysmic explosion of energy. The church, the site of her execution and the origin of her curse, began to crumble. Stones and wood groaned and splintered as the building appeared to be consumed by an unseen force, collapsing inward as if being dragged down into the very depths of the earth. Abigail, at the epicenter of this destruction, stood firm, her eyes reflecting the chaos around her. As the church imploded, it created a vortex, a gateway that seemed to lead to an abyss. The witch, along with the remnants of the church, was pulled into this void, a final act of self-destruction that would ensure her spirit would never again walk the earth. However, in a cruel twist of fate, Abigail's last act was not only to condemn herself, but to also trap the spirits of those who had wronged her centuries ago. With her remaining energy, she bound them to the mortal plane, denying them the peace of the afterlife. These spirits, once the accusers and executioners of Abigail Thornwood, were now condemned to roam the earth in eternal anguish. They were left to witness the aftermath of their actions, forever reminded of the injustice they had inflicted upon an innocent soul. As the sun rose over Eldridge Hollow, the town awoke to find the church gone, as if it had never existed. In its place was an empty chasm, a dark scar on the landscape that served as a grim reminder of the night's horrors. The witch was gone, but the legacy of her pain and anger lingered. The spirits of the past, now bound to the site of their greatest sin, became a haunting testament to the consequences of fear and misunderstanding. The town slowly began to heal from the night of terror, but the memory of Abigail Thornwood and the spirits trapped in eternal torment served as a cautionary tale, a warning that some injustices can reverberate through time, leaving scars that may never fully heal.
And if you're still looking to fulfill your thirst for more horror, don't forget to check out this next video, unless of course you're frozen with fear already.